Hello. Let me just put these in. Ah, already 4 viewers. Is this plugged in? Yeah. All right. So, hello, Jordan. The early risers. We've got had a question. Hello, Michael, from one of the various immortals, who asked, "What do I consider a neighbor, biblically speaking?" That's a good question because your neighbors are often referred to in the Bible, basically. And in my opinion, which that's all it is, it's my opinion. I'm not, as you all know, I'm not a great Bible scholar by any stretch. But if you think about it contextually, who was your neighbor back in Bible days? You didn't have the internet, you didn't have airplanes, so your neighbor was a guy that lived next door to you. Now, the thumbnail that I used for this video is the picture of a pretty Somalian girl. Is that your neighbor? Yeah, if you live in Somalia. The point is, your neighbors were people that you would generally share culture, a religion, and various other things with. And that is a natural case because, for example, in Papua New Guinea, still relatively recently, if members of one tribe came across members of another tribe in the wild, they would try and kill them. This is not unusual. In primitive societies and, thousands of years ago, somebody from a different tribe was essentially a threat to your tribe, to your people, to your kids, to your women, and they would be viewed at least with suspicion, if not outright hostility. So your neighbor is literally your neighbor. Now, I haven't lived in Italy for many years, but having returned here quite recently, I find that the commonalities of culture that I have with people, even though I haven't lived here for probably over 40 years, I don't know, are such that we have a very clear understanding of each other. So biblically, I believe that the question, who is your neighbor, is somebody who has your same culture, your same language, your same religious beliefs, at least nominally speaking. And that who is your neighbor. Your neighbor is not some guy from another country who speaks a different language, has a different religion, and just happens to have moved next door to you. That's not your neighbor. That's a stranger, and possibly an invader. And certainly back in Bible days, such a person would have been viewed with extreme suspicion, and if he was allowed to live in the community of X, he would always be seen as a Y, something different. He would be referred to as the Thracian, in the community of, say, Romans, or vice versa. So I think, hello, Mirkwood, I think that's the obvious sort of answer to that question. But if you see it differently, let me know. If you have other questions, let me know. I'm just doing a short one, which I hope is a short one and doesn't become one of my usual, 6-hour streams or something. But let's see, 11 people, just like the apostles, because one was a traitor, right? And there was some other topic I wanted to talk about, which I can't remember now. Just general farm work is pretty tiring stuff, and it's teaches you, oh yeah, that's what it was. I was just having this conversation with my loyal henchman, which is, I sent a link to, hello Henry, to, Mirkwood says, I thought your neighbor was someone very close to you, and that the Samaritan earned the title neighbor, not the other way around. Yeah, you see, what I was talking about with my loyal henchman was like, because I discussed this link from Bruce Charlton's blog where he talks about how and why the elite have pushed the button on the scamdemic and all that. And he said, well, it's because we have no more connection to reality, to anything supernatural and spiritual reality. So we're all disjointed, we're all living virtually, and nothing is real anymore. The only thing that we think is real is whatever they're showing us on the screen. So if on the screen they're showing us X, then X must be real. And no one thinks anymore. And even if anybody did think, all they could think of is that, well, the only thing that matters is action. Any action I would take would be either so dangerous or detrimental to myself, my family, that it's not worth doing. So I'll just go along to get along, sort of thing. And he also spoke about how real thought, a certain type of thought, affects reality. There was one guy that commented on Social Galactic that, oh, that sounds really new agey. But it's got nothing to do with new agey. It's got to do with the fact that, like prayer, right? Prayer is a form of thinking, if you like, and prayer done correctly produces results. So why is that? Because there's a certain quality to a certain type of thought. Sorry, but this is kind of bugging me. And that too was brought up, and I said, Bruce Charlton is right. There is no foundational stone left. And this becomes so self-evident when you're a Catholic in a small Catholic community like I am here and like I'm busy building up, because the level of friendship, duty, helpfulness from neighbors who are potentially strangers, right, is so clear and so foundational. It's so deep that it's really quite, if you've only lived in cities like, say, like London or New York or Tokyo or whatever, you have no experience of what I'm talking about. And unless you're a relatively wiser, not older, wiser man like myself, you probably haven't had that experience, unless you've lived in, unless you've lived in a little village or some remote area or some third world country where, people have to help each other by necessity. And Wooly Ram makes the excellent point that mental prayer is a full discipline in Catholicism. Yes, it is. But the point that Bruce Charlton was saying is like, we've got no foundation left that is based in a true spirituality. So no one does anything, no one thinks properly, and even if somebody thinks properly, they don't have the guts to act on it. But that's why I moved here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I am acting. I am creating a little community. There are people joining this community physically in meat space, and that's something. Back in the day, in medieval times, if they tried this pandemic thing, apart from the fact that you had the complexity of the communication gap, and but aside from all that, people would have said they knew how to think. It was like, no, 2 and 2 is 4. You're trying to tell me it's purple. No, we're just going to go to war. And if you keep insisting, I'll cut your head off. And you wouldn't have been able to subjugate a whole population to the level that globally we're being subjugated to, now. And it's a very interesting point. And that led him to ask a question and say, well, what about, somebody like, say, my father, who is not theologically inclined, doesn't know anything about anything, is he going straight to hell? And I said, well, the Catholic perspective is that somebody who is ignorant of Catholicism, because he has never come across it, will be judged on their conscience, which is a very, very hard way to get into heaven. There is a remote possibility, but it is very very difficult. I equate it to, like, if you throw a baby in a lake, will it get to the other side of the lake? If you throw 10 million babies in a lake, there's the chance that one of them will make it, but I wouldn't bet on those odds. And this is a similar thing. And he said, yeah, but he is aware of Catholicism. So, and here's my point. Well, is he aware? Because if I go back to, before I find out anything about God, Catholicism, etc., was I aware? I was aware there was this thing called the Catholic Church, which is fake, is not the real church, and so on. The things I thought I knew were all wrong and lies. And a great deal of that had to do with the fact that I was never exposed to the truth. I was never exposed to real Catholicism. I was exposed to fake Catholicism from a young age. And from a young age, I said, oh, this stuff is bullshit. And I was right. It was bullshit. But I'd never really met a proper Catholic. I never met a sedevacantist, until after I started looking for them. Now, if somebody is aware of Jesus or whatever, the sin that they're guilty of is laziness, because, well, if you know this exists, why you're not taking it seriously? But then again, if what you see is so superficially, obviously wrong and a lie, why would you look deeper into it? So I don't know what the answer is. I know that there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church, and I believe that to be correct. But as my priest says, you have to also try and be very particular about what you mean by in or out of the Catholic Church. So it's an important and meaningful distinction. But that led me to tell him, look, he said, but I wonder why people are so lost, but people here are still pretty cool. And I said, well, forget about supermarkets and shops and that. Imagine that we just had to survive off this land. That's it. You just gotta, whatever you can grow, whatever you can, otherwise you starve, you die. You think that you would not see God? Do you think that you would not understand God? Do you think that you would not have a foundational basis in spiritual reality? You would. Because after 3 months, you'd be like, it will rain in 2 days. Because you'll figure that out. Your natural instincts, your natural movement with the season, it's already happening to me, and I've only, been here I haven't even been here 2 months. But, I did grow up in a pretty rural, sort of wild, savage sort of way, so I never really lost those instincts. But I can see it with my son. He's a little kid, and he knows instinctively what food to eat, what food not to eat. He's almost like a little animal. It's like, no, you can offer him some crappy confection bullshit, and it'd be like, no. And plus, he's also got his own taste. Like, he doesn't like cheese. He has never eaten a little piece of cheese. Just like, no. And in that same way, you will feel stuff. You will understand, okay, I have to prune the trees now. I have to plant this. And in living naturally, you naturally get exposed to reality. And reality includes the supernatural. Reality includes God. That is why it tells you in the Bible, like, God is everywhere. You should be able to see God in just your day-to-day life. This thing that we're all looking into right now, that you're all looking into right now, I'm trying to use this in the subversive way that is my nature. So I'll try and use the enemy's weapons against him. But ultimately, this is a disconnect. Although I appreciate every single one of you being here and listening and so on, and those of you that support my work, buy my books, of course, I'm rooting for you guys like you're rooting for me. But it's a completely different level of interaction, this, than, my neighbor who the other day saw I was trying to dig some holes and said, hey, I've got a tool for that. And he came, we cut the fence. There was a fence there because the guy that I bought this property from was, that hippie fag wanker who just pissed everybody off. And he was just really, one of the neighbors told me, that guy argued with me about the bees. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I've got some bees. And he was arguing about my bees going to drink his water from his well. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? And he was like, no, I'm not kidding you. I mean, what kind of a freak does that? I'm like, what did he want? Did he want you to pay money for the water that your bees were stealing from his pond? I mean, like, what the hell? I mean, just how Jewish was this guy? It's like, and uh, so he had built up a fence because his dogs and cows and whatever, cattle and goats, whatever he had, used to go and crap on the neighbor's yard, and the neighbor got pissed off, and he was like, piss off, keep your animals on you, let them shit in your house, not in my house. So, but I haven't been here long at all, but we get on. So, and everybody thinks this old man, he's a grumpy old man. He's awesome. He's the coolest guy. And you were like, no, fuck it, I don't like this fence, because I want to lend you some things, or you. So we cut the fence. We made a hole in it. And now I can go into his land. The other day, he asked us for like a couple of minutes help to like take down a big tank that he had. But he does everything by himself, that old dude. And he saw I was digging a hole. He said, no, I've got a tool for that. Here, come take it. And we've got such a good relationship. I'm pretty autistic about returning tools, books, borrow books, that sort of thing. I haven't even returned it to him yet because I just put it in the place where I keep the tools, and I haven't seen him. We've both been busy. Today was raining, so we just finished a little bit of work that we had, and then we kind of took half the day off. And I'll give it to him the next time I see him. And I'm not losing sleep over it. He's not losing sleep over it. I know it sounds like a silly little thing, but I wouldn't get that in London, in a big city or whatever. If a neighbor borrowed me something, that would already be so unusual that it would be like, oh, I need to make sure I get this back the next day or whatever, So, and I don't know, that's the thing. If you live in a natural environment, the natural order for humanity is to have knowledge and sensation of and ability to perceive and think properly, because reality is like martial arts, a punch in the face. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. The sun rises in the east, and when it rains, you get wet if you don't cover up. It teaches you reality, and reality involves God. So that's why, it's getting back to sort of a natural way of living, farming, whatever, is very important. Um, it will give you a foundation, and of course, if you're Catholic, you have a foundation. And this foundation of Catholicism, even in London, the Catholics we knew in London, some of which, by the way, are trying to move here now that I'm here, was important for them, for us as well, to know each other, because there was an instant connection of friendship, of neighborliness that you didn't have even with the guy that lived next door to you, because he didn't have the Catholic foundation. So it's a very, very important concept. That, let me just catch up quickly with the comments, and if you've got questions, bring them on, because I am going to keep this one short. Good middle of the night, Kurgan and Immortals. Yeah, that was Woolly Ram. Hello. Daniel Pereira says, my neighbors are people who cook curry, every single person on my floor except the old Canadian lady. Well, Daniel, I guess you're in the wrong country then, because if they all cook curry and you don't, you're the odd man out. Woolly Ram says, a righteous heathen might attain limbo. Good curry is nothing to scoff at. So Woolly Ram says, good curry is nothing to scoff at. And Mirkwood goes, curry makers, on the other hand, ... And Daniel says, the obvious corruption of those occupying church position is responsible for a huge wave of apostasy. Well, of course. And they're not corruption occupying church positions. They're usurpers that have stolen what is not rightfully theirs in order to corrupt it, pervert it, and make it something that it wasn't. Henry says exactly this. Jordan, modern day reality for most is having their fight flight triggered by not wearing a mask in a supermarket. That's true. That is true. The anxiety attack of not wearing a mask in a supermarket. That's a fact. And Woolly Ram says this is reflecting a conversation I just had with TVCL about reality and constructed narratives. Okay. Eerie. Well, TVCL is actually the guy who posed the question, so maybe not so eerie because the original question about neighbors came from him. Henry says fists don't care about your feelings. Henry knows this firsthand, as do I. Hello, Chris. And Daniel says he was born here, they were not. Well, if they outnumber you, it's time to move. And Daniel also says at Woolly Ram, it isn't good curry, and I would know. Woolly says, my condolences. Henry says, I completely agree. We must have a natural capacity to perceive and interact with God because we're here and here created here. No, because we're here of here created here. Away from the Babylon hive mind, nonsense really exists. Yeah, the hive mind of Babylon is indeed taken over the world pretty much. But I don't know how much power they have. I mean, they can certainly exercise power over individuals, but that's why the masses haven't burnt the elite out of their nests with pitchforks. It's because they have no foundation. They have no. I mean, I can tell you now that the people that are here and surround me and that I'm with, you know, if they were trying to impose by force vaccines on our kids or something, to a man, there would be no survivors. And you know, when you have to deal with people like that, either you have a really big army or you're going to take some losses. That's just how it goes. So I urge all of you to make your little meat space army. And, you know, don't let the fear porn get to you. And remember that to think properly, you need to be able to see reality properly. In order to see reality properly, there is no model that works better than the Catholic Church. And I mean the actual Catholic Church, of course, not the Norcos. You know, those of you that are not Catholic might think I'm just whistling Dixie. I'm not. And again, as I've said before, it doesn't even matter if you're Catholic or not. It doesn't matter if you believe in Catholicism or not. It doesn't even matter if you believe in God or not. If the model works, use it. Catholicism created Western civilization. Doesn't matter whether you like it or not like it. Doesn't matter whether you're Orthodox and you would like it to be different. It isn't. Orthodoxy did not create Western civilization. Protestantism did not certainly create Western civilization. In fact, Protestantism has been dismantling Western civilization for 500 years. And it took them that long to, you know, get us to where we are today. Catholicism created Western civilization. And, you know, you just need to read really a couple of books for you to realize that that is exactly the case. So, if the model that created the best system of life on earth for humans, you know, works, why would you try and use something different? So, even if you're not Catholic, Catholicism is the way to go. Even if you don't believe in it, Catholicism is the way to go. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, if it is the way to go, if Catholicism really did create the best human systems on earth, the best nations on earth, the nations that created, the truly enlightened things, not the fake French Revolution enlightenment. I'm talking about the works of art, the beauty, the cathedrals, the writings that were done by pious Catholics over the ages. That was definitely a real progress in human nature, in human society, in human living conditions. And it's all Catholics that did that. So why would you not use that as your base? It is truly timeless. So indeed, Willie Ram says, new for newness sake. All right, I'm gonna give you guys another couple of minutes. It's been 26 minutes. I'm gonna try and keep it to a half an hour because I'm tired. I have very long, tiring days, and my hands are stained green from the gloves. I don't. I now have some green fingers, and it's got nothing to do with keeping the plants alive. It's just because we actually picked up a couple of sets of welder's gloves because the thorn bushes out here are like brutal, and normal working gloves, they just go through that shit. They can go through even the welder's ones, but it's a lot harder. So when you're not chopping, trimming, cutting things, it's useful. But the thing is, they got wet because I was working with some cement, wet stuff, and then it rained, and the green dye of the gloves leaked, and it doesn't come off. You have to wait obviously a couple of days before. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can see there's like a bit of green on my. There you go, a bit of green on the end, and that's after scrubbing and washing, a few times. So yeah, it is long, tiring days. So I am pretty tired, but if you have any questions, shoot them now, because at about in another 2 or 3 minutes, I'm gonna call it a night. Hello, Tom. Buona Pasqua to you too. It is, of course, Easter. Tomorrow, we're gonna go to Mass, get my friend prepared for baptism. I've got three friends that are gonna get baptized soon, and tomorrow we're gonna discuss with the priest, what preparations they need to make and so on. So yeah, things are good. And had another request for joining the Kurganate from a relative stranger. Most of the people that are joining us I've known, or we've discussed things for a while. LS16 says, Hail Kurgan Immortals, I'm late, but I made it. Okay, LS16, ask your questions now, whatever they are, because I've been on for almost half hour, and about half hour I'm going to cut it out unless something perks up my ears. Oh, Mirkwood says, I hope the farmer's life brings you peace. I've never slept in my life as I have when I worked at our friend's farm. I wish I slept that way. Unfortunately, I've got 3 little kids, and they tend to wake up throughout the night. So my sleep is, if anything, less than it's ever been before. And Willie Ram says, how much of World War I and World War II were perpetuated to squash the human spirit in preparation for this age? By some accounts, pretty much all of it. In fact, apparently, Churchill wanted to crush the Germans, particularly for that, to crush their spirit of, the Germans are a pretty simple, wind-up toy type people. You just need to get a shouty guy to tell them what to do, and they're like a little wind-up bunny. You just twist the thing on their back, and they're like start to march. With their legs all up high and shit, and they do what they're told. If you have a population like that can create pretty strong economy pretty quickly. that competes with the English, and that was Churchill wanted to break that spirit, as well as um, I don't know. It's got to the point where I've recently discovered that the Nazis at Nuremberg admitted to all sorts of war crimes. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe there was a Holocaust. I don't believe there was 6 million Jews died. I do believe a lot of people died, especially Roma, homosexuals, Jews, political dissidents. There was all sorts of Catholics. There was all sorts of things that got killed in the Second World War by the Germans. But apparently, the Nuremberg trial confessions were obtained through torture of kicking the Germans in the balls to the point where their testicles became useless. They were tortured to confess to all sorts of things. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I don't think Himmler or any of those guys was a good hero just doing his bit for the folk. But given what's going on now, given the fake news that you see now, and given that you now have a better understanding that it was always thus, who knows what the real history of World War II is? What I do know is that it was funded by partly the Rothschilds, it was funded by Jewish families. What I do know is that Hitler was partly Jewish. As hilarious as that sounds, his father was Jewish. And Hitler erased almost all traces of his background. Hitler got the Iron Cross, and the guy who gave him the Iron Cross was Jewish in the First World War. Again, if you look at Hitler speak, you can't tell me that that's a normal guy I think he's a fucking freak. And I don't think he was a good guy or anything like that, but who knows what the real situation is. I know he didn't die in that bunker. Fucking absolutely certain of that. So who knows what the real story really is. And I think David Irwin, it wasn't David Irwin that proved it. David Irwin publicized it, and he went to jail for it, and they lambasted him all over the newspapers as a Holocaust denier and blah, blah, blah. David Irwin is an Englishman who spent years going through the German archives to try and figure out just how many people were killed in the camps and who killed them and what happened. He did massive amounts of research, and he simply pointed out that the so-called gas chambers were never actually gas chambers, and that there is no trace of Zyklon B in any of the brickwork and so on. And the guys who did this test was some Canadian guy, was some engineer, and it was done by more than one person. So, again, we have this narrative, but it becomes more and more obvious when you're Catholic just why this is the domain of the Prince of Lies. It becomes absolutely obvious that we're living on a prison planet that is complete bullshit from top to bottom. And once you find it out, especially if you're not Catholic, like when I found this out, I was 26, certainly not a Catholic by any shape or form or even distant imagination. It can make you pretty misanthropic, somewhat bitter, and like contemptuous of other humans. As a Catholic, you're just like, oh, yeah, it all makes sense. So it's a very interesting perspective. It gives you a much healthier foundation on which to stand, which you that's what you want. I mean, that's why it works, because it is based on truth and reality. Again, if you're standing on solid rock, you can take whatever's coming at you a lot better than if you're like floating about in quicksand, which is essentially what you're doing when you don't have a spiritual home that is rooted in reality. Irakir says, thanks for sharing your grassroots Catholicism efforts. Would love to hear more to get inspired. Well, I've mentioned it before. You have to be a zealot. And another very, very, very important point is, do you think that in the year 1098, if they tried to pull that pandemic, what do you think would have happened? There would have been a crusade, and the people who tried to pull it off would have been burnt at the stake because people had a true belief. You really need to be an absolute extremist when it comes to truth. It's you can't just piss about. Again, just imagine for a second, whether you do believe it or not. If Jesus, who we said it was, Catholicism is correct, etc., it is the most important thing you should figure out in your life. Absolutely the most important. You need to know that. So it's worth investigating, right? I mean, at least I think so. Mirkwood says, is Churchill the hero that they say he is? All I know is the English sold our Catholic anti-communist troops in exchange for Trieste. Yeah, the British have always been slightly Arab in their dealings, I find. Woolly Ram, all this stuff makes me wonder about the various wars, conflicts, and terror in the Middle East and Israel. How much of it happened? Something happened, but exactly why and how and whom, that's different. Chris Gavier says, just moved. All my new neighbors are French. You have my condolences. I believe you also live in Canada. I think Justin Trudeau was just gone full-blown gay there recently, saying about the COVID tests and all that. And Woolly Ram says it gets harder and harder to follow or care about the day-by-day happening. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that since I've been here, all the social media stuff, I couldn't care less. I just got banned on Facebook for like 30 days because one of my friends put me in this group called the Fats Are Angry. Fats Are Angry. And there was a picture of some obese woman posing in a bikini, and like some people were like, oh, I would smash that, I would hit it. It's like, oh, she's not that fat, she just got a few extra pounds. And I was like, that is disgusting. And all the porker wannabes that are saying that pork, that's sick. You must all be American and used to completely obese, disgusting fat pigs, because that creature is just horrendously lardy and gross. Now, keep in mind, this is a closed group called the Fats Are Angry, and obviously some Yankee got all his knickers in a twist and decided, no. So I guess I got reported, and I guess I got banned on Facebook for 30 days for calling a fat pig a fat pig. Do you think I care? I mean, the only reason I'm on Facebook is I'm too lazy or too busy, really, to figure out how to download all my pictures and little videos and whatever family shots and stuff that I have on there. Otherwise, it can disappear tomorrow. Nothing will change in my life. Again, this channel the same. I expect to be banned at any moment. And when they do, I'll maybe upload on BitChute or whatever. But again, I don't depend on this stuff. And it is far more satisfying, doing what I'm doing now. I do enjoy this interaction with you guys, but that's another thing. I'm going to start sending you people to my blog. It's being updated. The Adventure Science info link is starting to work again. And there's going to be a list, because I do expect we eventually will all get kicked off everything. So if you sign up to the list, you will be... I don't spam people. I mean, I had a subscription list on my blog anyways. I've never sent out one notification in about 5, 6, 7 years, however, 10 years more. No, it's more than 10 years now that I've had that blog. I've never sent out a single notification, so it's not exactly like you're gonna get rammed with spam, but the point is to be able to keep in touch regardless of whether they ban me or not. So that's my comment on that. Let's see a couple more comments. And Chris says they just got a new lockdown, but he's pretty close to a church there, so he doesn't think he'll move anytime soon. Bring back fat shaming. Tom says, random comment about the absurdity of Protestantism, particularly Lutheranists. They don't acknowledge the Catholic Church's canonized saints or any of the ability to canonize in general. Notwithstanding what sacred scripture has to say about it as such, they can't say Luther himself is a saint, i.e. in heaven, and therefore nevertheless adhering to a religion that was founded by a guy who could very well be in hell. Of course we Catholics have a good idea, but that's besides the point. Whereas the Catholics, they lambast, remain in the church, whose founder, Jesus, is most certainly in heaven. It's in the Bible. Perhaps, like Protestants who insist that Catholics worship Mary, I'm misunderstanding something, but unlike most Protestants, I eagerly await an explanation based on reason and divine revelation. Tom, don't hold your breath while you wait for that explanation. Finnish Bear USA says, why have people lost the ability to think? Laziness, convenience. You'd rather sit here listening to me talk to you instead of read a book. Why aren't you reading the canon law of the Catholic Church of 1917? Why aren't you reading the Catechism of Trent? For that matter, why aren't you reading my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church, which explains a whole bunch of stuff? Because this is easy. You can just sit there and go, oh yeah, I'm learning stuff from the Kurgan now. Oh, I'm wise now. I'm a true Catholic. No. Form your little community. Become a meat space crusading little army. That will force you to think. That will force you to think real thoughts that matter, because you have to follow through on them to create something in the world. People have lost the ability to think because of cell phones. If you read my Overlords of Mars, one of the characters in there is basically telling you that that's the next step, because it's set in 1999, but they've already got bases on Mars. And it's like, yeah, we're going to bring out these cell phones to like destroy people's attention span. As a 9-year-old, I read Shogun and I read Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the original one, the thick one. Shogun is a huge book. I read Lord of the Rings when I was 12. Because I grew up in Africa, didn't have computers, didn't have the internet. Reading was awesome. I've read thousands of books, and if I had more time, I'd read thousands and thousands more. I'm trying to read 2 or 3 books at any given time, and I just find the time to read them all together. And the books I really want to enjoy and savor, like Imitation of Christ or the Iliad, the Odyssey, I don't have the time to just chill out, but hopefully now I will, because again, becoming a farmer, I have to work my ass off right now because it's spring. But come winter, if I've chopped all my wood and I've got all my stuff, I just sit in my little house and cook my food, burn my wood to keep warm, and read a book, play with my kids, throw snowballs. There's a much more natural rhythm. So I hope I've answered your question, Finnish Bear. Dan in Georgia. I like Dan's sense of humor on social galactic. Should be able to automate uploading to BitChute. Yes, I should, but I'm not going to. Do you know why? Because I have a wizard in my party. That's right. As a paladin monk, my abilities are punching people, climbing walls, doing all sorts of fancy mystic shit, turning the undead, and fighting for a holy crusade. But the wizard in the party is the IT guy. He has to cast those spells and read those scrolls and do the magic things and sacrifice small animals to the altar of his keyboard so that he can sort that shit out. So yeah, that's gonna be. Yes, we are gonna get animals, starting with dogs, I think. But I need to sort out quite a few more things to make it comfortable, both for us and the dogs. And especially the dogs. It would be a bit unfair to get a dog right now. I'm still busy sorting out the inside of the house. Never mind, dog kennels and stuff like that outside. Also, I'd like to get a little puppy so that the kids can, play with it, but a puppy right now is out of the question just because we still got fucking boxes all over the place. Kitchen is going to take about a month to get sorted. I still have to paint pretty much the rest of the house. Clean up the beams that this fucking brilliant idiot architect decided to paint 300-year-old beams in the house. Lovely shades of vomit green and diarrhea yellow and dusty gray, because why wouldn't you paint over 300-year-old wooden beams with those shitty colors? So I have to like strip that stuff, put back the original wood, varnish it, paint the rest of the house some colors that are not vomit green and puke yellow. So I got a lot to do, and that's just inside the house. Plus there's all the stuff outside the house. I've got maybe a month left to do all the pruning that I need doing. There's a vineyard that needs to be cleared up. There's fucking thorns everywhere that need chewing up. So a lot of stuff to do. LS16 says, Tom, the Lutherans still say the part in the creed about believing in the communion of saints despite all evidence. They don't care about consistency in the least. Well, of course not. They're Protestants. And actually, I saw a very brilliant meme today that said, what religion are you? And I think it had something in the left, I can't remember what it was. It had Buddhists in the bottom right. It had normal, i.e. Catholic, praying in a church on the bottom left. And on the top right it said Protestant/Jew. And it's true. The Jews are the original Protestants. That's also, by the way, why all the Americans have got their dicks snipped. Because Jews created America by default as a Freemasonic country, and they just want your little foreskins for some reason, so that Sandra Bullock can put it all over her face as a queen. No kidding, that's what they do with them apparently. Chris says, Texas got rid of all the COVID regulations. Do you think they'll back down, or could this be the beginning of the end? I think the elite are not as powerful as people think, and all it takes is a few guys just getting off their ass and saying, fuck you, we're not going to do that. What are they going to do? Again, in the UK, there's 125,000 police in the whole of the UK. And there's about 20 million able-bodied men. Just in the ages of like 22 to 45, I checked the statistics. I think there's 8 million men between the ages of 22 and 45. It's 125,000 cops. What are you going to do? The 125,000 cops most of them don't even have guns. If those able-bodied men grew a pair of balls, went to the store, bought a set and stitched it on, and started acting like men, well, every single politician in the UK could be thrown out of their houses into the street, tarred and feathered in a day. And no one could do a damn thing about it. But there's no unity. There's no solid foundation. There is no culture anymore. It's always the year zero. What's the most important thing now? Well, let's kneel for the NHS and clap for black people or something. Or maybe it's Hindus. Or wait, is it Tuesday? I think it's the Muslims' turn on Tuesdays. What do you believe? What do you stand for? What are you willing to take a bullet in cold blood for? Even people who claim to be Christians, you think if you put a gun to their head and say, right, deny Jesus Christ or we pull the trigger, most of them will deny it right there and then. I would deny it because I have kids. But me personally, if you're just talking, bubble universe and you're just talking about me, fuck you, pull that trigger. Wouldn't hesitate a fucking second. And that's the difference. If you get 100 men that are willing to say no, We're going to stand, you're going to have to kill every one of us. You get 100 men like that in one place, working with each other, coordinating with each other. You can take over a country with 100 men like that. So, Daddy Nickel 52, hello, sir. I know exactly who you are. Kurgan, greetings from my corner of the world here in the heartland of the US. Always welcome, Daddy Nickel. I enjoy your posts and so on when I get a chance to look at them. Chris says the end of the COVID madness, at least for some time. I think we're still a ways from that. Wooly Ram says, tinfoil hat question. Is there a connection between the devil being prince of the air and the current obsession with wireless tech? Interesting question. Possibly. Yeah. Why not? Dan says, do the kids speak any Italian? And my son understands Italian. When I speak to him, I can speak to him in Italian or in English. He understands pretty well, of course. The English are language challenged, so his mom, the loyal henchman, essentially speak English, so he's probably more familiar with English, but he seems to understand me just fine. And he says certain words in Italian that I've spoken to him since we were kids, since he was little. But he's not much of a talker in that it's amazing. You can see the guy, he knows words. Because today, for example, he was playing with the different torches. There was 3 little torches we keep by the house in case the electricity goes out or whatever. And he was like, that one. And he wanted the one that when you click it a couple of times, it gets onto this like flashing thing, that if you're an epileptic, that'll probably mess you up. But he likes that one because it's like, makes more lights. And he goes, that one. And he was telling the loyal henchman, this, and like, door, this, because it's inside a cupboard. You have to open the door. Like this. And we all knew what he was doing, right? But the loyal henchman perfectly gave him the one that doesn't do that. And he goes, no, this one. Like, oh, complete sentence. So, when you need to, he does. But he likes to globalize stuff. Even like counting, he's not 2 years old yet, but now he's like 1, 2. I was showing him the shoes, 1, 2. But then I can see in his little brain, he's like 1, 1, 1. They're all 1, What is this 2 shit? Also, you're going 1, 2 in this direction, but then you're going 1, 2 in the other direction, which I did that on purpose because I could see. He was thinking, wait, why is he calling that 1? Is that always 1, or is that just 1 now? Or is it the position? So when I switch it around, I'm like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, count from the other end. And he can see he's like figuring it out and he's got it, but he's like, my daughter was like that as well, that he wants to be like sure before he like speaks it out, unless he needs something, then he'll just try and explain whatever as quickly as he needs to. He's very male in his way of doing things. Chris says, do you think it's more important to learn to shoot a bow or a hunting rifle? A hunting rifle, without question, by about 1,000 times more. Dan says the Guardian Island can't handle all the diversity crime. Yeah, exactly. But they'll probably arrest an Irishman if he drank a pint the wrong day of the week. And Chris says, I think in Northern Ireland there are no police because the Irish have more balls than the English. Yeah, they're also a bit more unstable. So, crazy people are always a bit more troublesome. And Chris says, I broke my Lent fast about 10 times. Is this something I should confess to a priest? If you're in doubt, confess it. I wish that was the height of my sins. And Tom says, all right, I've got to get these twins out of the bath. Happy Easter to you all. Happy Easter to you, Tom. And Finnish Bear says, happy Easter as well. Rakir says, Christus resurrexit, vere resurrexit. Happy Easter to all. Indeed, and on that happy note, Happy Easter to all. He is risen, and tomorrow I will be going to Mass, and I hope that you will all be doing the same. Have a good Easter, and thank you once again for all of you being here. 20 thumbs up, no thumb down yet. I guess that one little Judas hasn't found the stream yet. Have a good night all, and have a good Easter.